"Will you stay if I take off my clothes?" the Apache woman asked after the lone rancher saved her from drowning. The sun hung low over the wide plains, casting long shadows over the rugged land. The ranch was quiet, almost too quiet, with only the sound of the wind whispering through the tall grass and the occasional cry of a distant bird. The lone rancher rode along the edge of the river, his horse moving steadily through the uneven terrain. He had lived here for many years, preferring the solitude of the land to the noise and complications of town life. His life was simple: care for the ranch, tend to the cattle, and make sure that he survived in a place where nature often tested the limits of endurance. The rancher had a tall, lean frame, his skin weathered from years under the relentless sun. His eyes, a sharp gray, scanned the land constantly, always alert for any change in the environment. He had a routine, and he liked it that way. The river was particularly important to him, not just for the water it provided for his animals, but also for the quiet sense of peace it offered. He often rode along its banks in the evening, letting the sound of flowing water calm his mind and soothe the memories of the past that sometimes came too clearly to him. On this day, however, the river seemed unusually loud. The wind carried a strange, frantic sound over the water, a splashing that did not belong to any animal he knew. The rancher's ears pricked up, and his hand went instinctively to the lasso hanging from his saddle. He spurred his horse forward, following the sound, his heart quickening with the sense that something was wrong. As he drew closer, he saw a figure in the river, struggling against the current. A woman, barely able to stay afloat, was being pulled under by the rushing water. Without thinking, the rancher threw himself from his horse, the reins slipping from his hands. He ran along the bank, assessing the situation. He had saved cattle from drowning, repaired fences in a storm, and faced many dangers alone, but never had he been confronted with this kind of life-and-death moment for a person. The water was cold, biting at his skin as he waded in, but he ignored it. The river did not care about his comfort or his plans. It only moved with its own unstoppable force. He reached the woman just as she was about to disappear beneath the surface. She flailed, her eyes wide with panic, and he grabbed her arm with a strength born of urgency. He pulled her toward the shallower water, feeling her weight against his own, every muscle straining against the river's relentless push. Finally, he managed to reach the bank, dragging her onto the shore. She lay there coughing and shivering, water dripping from her hair and clothes. The rancher knelt beside her, checking for injuries, and offered her a blanket he had in his saddlebag. She was strong, despite her exhaustion, and quickly wrapped herself in it, shivering but alive. For a moment, neither spoke. The woman's chest rose and fell rapidly as she tried to catch her breath. Her eyes, dark and wary, met the rancher's. He noticed a cautious intelligence in them, a fire that had not been extinguished even by the river's attempt to swallow her. He realized that this was no ordinary person. She was someone who had survived far more than most could imagine. "Are you all right?" he asked finally, his voice calm but firm. The woman nodded, though her body still trembled. I think so," she replied softly, her voice cautious, almost hesitant. She pulled the blanket tighter around her, as if it offered not just warmth but a shield against the world. The rancher helped her to sit up, offering her water and speaking in gentle tones. He could see the relief slowly spreading across her face, but also the lingering wariness. She had been taught, perhaps by experience, to trust very few people. He understood that instinct. He himself trusted almost no one. Life on the plains was hard and people were often cruel. "Where are you from?" he asked, careful not to sound intrusive. The woman hesitated. I live nearby," she said finally, her words clipped. She did not elaborate and the rancher did not press. He could tell that pushing her would only drive her away, and she had already faced enough danger for one day. He helped her to his horse, guiding her gently but firmly. She sat carefully, still shivering, and held the blanket close. The rancher led the horse along the riverbank, keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings. The plains were beautiful, yes, but also dangerous. Predators lurked and storms could appear suddenly, unforgiving and relentless. He had learned to respect nature, and he sensed that the woman did too. As they reached the ranch, he could see the curiosity in her eyes. The small wooden house, the fenced pastures, the animals grazing peacefully, all of it seemed foreign and yet strangely comforting. She had lived a life of constant movement, of vigilance, and this quiet stability must have felt almost unreal. He led her inside, offering her a warm place by the fire. The room was simple, sparsely furnished, but it carried a sense of order and safety. She sat down, still wrapped tightly in the blanket, and allowed herself a few moments to relax. The rancher moved around, preparing a warm meal, all the while keeping an eye on her. He had a duty to protect her now, and he took it seriously. As they ate, he learned a little more about her. She spoke sparingly, careful with her words, but her story emerged slowly. She was part of a nearby Apache community, living a life connected to the land, strong in skills and knowledge that had been passed down through generations. She had been collecting water and supplies along the river when she had slipped, the current catching her off guard. She had survived by sheer determination, but she would not have survived long without the rancher's intervention. The rancher listened quietly, offering no judgment, only understanding. He had seen enough of the world's harshness to know that survival often depended on timing, luck, and courage. This woman had all three, and he respected her for it. Night fell over the ranch, and the fire crackled in the hearth. The woman sat close, wrapped in the blanket, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. There was a quiet understanding between them now, an unspoken acknowledgement of what had passed. She trusted him enough to accept his help, and he respected her enough to give her space. Sleep came slowly for both of them. The rancher lay on his cot, listening to the soft breathing of the woman in the next room. He had lived alone for so long that the presence of another human being was both comforting and unsettling. He knew that this encounter would change things, that the solitude he had cherished might now be complicated by responsibility and connection. The woman, too, found it difficult to sleep. Her body ached, and her mind replayed the events of the river over and over. Yet there was a strange sense of safety here that she had not felt in a long time. The rancher's presence was steady and reliable, a stark contrast to the chaos and unpredictability she had faced in the river. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to believe that she might survive not just physically, but also emotionally. Morning arrived with the soft light of dawn spilling across the plains. The river glimmered in the distance, a reminder of both danger and life. The rancher prepared breakfast, and the woman helped where she could, her movements careful but deliberate. There was a rhythm to their actions, a silent cooperation that spoke volumes about trust and mutual respect. As the day wore on, the woman began to speak more freely, sharing small stories about her life, her family, and her community. The rancher listened with interest, offering his own stories in return, though always keeping a careful boundary. They were learning about each other, building a fragile but important bridge between two very different lives. The rancher could see that she was strong, independent, and resourceful. She had survived the river, but she had also survived much more in her life, navigating a world that was often hostile to her people. He respected that resilience and felt a growing admiration for her courage. By the end of the day, there was a sense of calm and mutual understanding between them. They had faced danger together and in doing so, had begun to form a bond built on respect, trust, and shared humanity. Neither of them knew what the future held, but for now they had each other, and that was enough. The sun set over the plains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The rancher and the woman sat outside, watching the colors change and listening to the soft sounds of the land. There was a quiet peace in the air, a promise of safety and survival that neither had expected when the day began. In that moment, both understood that life on the plains was unpredictable, full of danger and uncertainty. Yet it was also full of connection, courage, and the possibility of trust. And though the events of the river would not soon be forgotten, they had both discovered something equally important: the strength of the human spirit and the unexpected power of compassion and courage. The days after the river incident passed quietly, yet the air between the rancher and the Apache woman was charged with a mixture of curiosity, caution, and unspoken questions. Life on the ranch was predictable, and the routine brought both comfort and unease. The rancher continued his work with the cattle and fences, while she helped where she could, learning the ways of the land in small, careful steps. Yet, beneath the calm surface, there were challenges neither of them could ignore. The woman's presence on the ranch did not go unnoticed by the wider world. The nearby settlers and townspeople were wary of outsiders, especially those from Apache communities. Whispers and rumors drifted on the wind, carried along the trails to the ranch. Some believed she might be in danger, others assumed she was a threat. The rancher, however, paid little attention to gossip. He had learned long ago that the world was full of opinions and that few matched reality. Still, he could sense the tension in her movements, the way her eyes darted toward the horizon whenever a distant voice carried across the plains. She had been quiet in the beginning, cautious with every word and gesture. Trust was not easily given, and she had learned that the hard way. Her people had faced countless challenges over the years: land disputes, conflicts, and misunderstandings that had left many wary of outsiders. And yet, she had survived. Her determination, intelligence, and resilience had carried her through more than anyone could imagine. But survival also required judgment, and she knew that making the wrong choice now could be dangerous. The rancher noticed her wariness, and he respected it. He did not push her to speak or to act in ways she was uncomfortable with. Instead, he focused on creating a sense of safety, a place where she could rest and recover from her ordeal. He often worked near her, repairing fences or tending to the animals, allowing her to move at her own pace. Slowly, the boundaries between them began to blur, replaced by a cautious, careful camaraderie. One afternoon, as the sun climbed high in the sky and the heat pressed down on the land, the woman ventured to the edge of the ranch, observing the river from a distance. Her eyes, usually so alert and cautious, seemed distant, as if she were remembering the chaos of the day she had nearly drowned. The rancher approached quietly, not wanting to startle her. "You don't have to stay by yourself all the time," he said gently, standing a few feet away. "I know the river scared you, but it's calm now. You're safe." Fear and respect for nature often walked hand in hand, and she had learned that lesson well. "I won't lie," he said. "It can be dangerous, but you're stronger than you think. You survived it, didn't you?" Trust was a fragile thing, built slowly over time and often tested by circumstance. The rancher knew this, and he also knew that earning her trust would require patience, respect, and consistency. Days turned into weeks, and their routines intertwined. The rancher taught her how to tend to the cattle, repair fences, and read the weather patterns that could dictate the safety of the land. She, in turn, shared knowledge of the plants along the riverbank, the best ways to find food and water, and the subtle signs of danger that only someone familiar with the land could notice. Their relationship was balanced by mutual respect and necessity, a partnership forged by survival rather than choice. Yet, despite the growing understanding between them, challenges continued to arise. The world outside the ranch was not always kind. One morning, the rancher spotted tracks near the edge of the property, large, deliberate prints that suggested someone had passed through the land, possibly watching them. He did not panic, but he knew enough about human behavior to sense potential danger. He approached the woman cautiously. "Someone has been near the ranch," he said. "I don't know who, but we need to be careful." The woman stayed near him, alert and attentive, yet determined to maintain her independence. Neither wanted to feel trapped, yet both understood the importance of caution. During this period, small incidents tested their trust in each other. One afternoon, the woman attempted to cross a particularly tricky part of the river to gather herbs, despite the rancher's advice to wait. The current was stronger than she anticipated and she slipped, her foot caught between rocks. The rancher was already in motion, diving into the water to pull her free. She emerged shaken, grateful, and slightly embarrassed. "You should have listened," he said firmly, though there was concern in his voice. "I wanted to," she admitted. "But I also need to know I can handle things on my own." As the weeks passed, the rancher noticed changes in her demeanor. The initial fear and caution were still there, but beneath it was growing confidence. She began to participate more actively in daily tasks, taking initiative and offering solutions to problems. She learned the rhythm of the land, how to anticipate changes in weather, and how to keep the animals safe. The rancher, in turn, began to rely on her observations and insights, recognizing that her knowledge of the environment often surpassed his own. But challenges were never far away. One evening, a storm rolled in unexpectedly, dark clouds stretching across the sky and the wind rising in sudden gusts. The river swelled, threatening to overflow its banks. The rancher and the woman worked quickly, reinforcing fences and securing animals, their hands and movements coordinated by necessity. Rain began to fall, heavy and relentless, soaking them both, but neither faltered. They worked through the night, relying on each other's strength, and by morning the ranch was safe. That night, as they sat by the fire drying off, there was a quiet moment of reflection. The woman, usually reserved, spoke first. "I didn't think I would survive that river, but now, I don't know. Life is different than I thought." It reminds us that we can endure more than we imagine, and that sometimes trust is necessary to survive. Without it, we survive alone, and that can be lonelier than any danger. And she was beginning to see that the rancher was someone who could be trusted, not because he promised safety, but because his actions consistently showed care and respect. Despite the growing trust, the outside world remained unpredictable. There were days when the wind carried strange voices, or the distant sound of horses approaching reminded them that they were never entirely isolated. The woman's instincts sharpened. She moved carefully, always observing, always evaluating the landscape. The rancher watched her, silently admiring her resilience and adaptability. She had survived challenges that would have defeated others, and her spirit was unyielding. Their bond deepened not through grand gestures, but through quiet moments of cooperation, shared hardships, and the slow, careful building of trust. They learned to anticipate each other's needs, to communicate without words, and to respect boundaries even as they relied on one another. It was a delicate dance, fragile yet essential, and it grew stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the plains, the woman spoke in a rare moment of openness. "I don't know how to thank you for saving me," she said, her voice soft, almost vulnerable. The rancher shrugged, a small smile on his lips. "You don't need to thank me. I did what anyone would do. You didn't run or leave me to the river. That matters." For the first time since the river incident, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps she was not alone. That trust could exist even in a world that often seemed unkind. And so, life continued on the ranch, a delicate balance of work, vigilance, and quiet companionship. The challenges were many, the dangers real, but they faced them together, learning that survival was not just about strength or skill. It was also about trust, understanding, and the willingness to face hardship with someone at your side. Life on the ranch had settled into a rhythm, but even in the calm, the world beyond their small haven remained unpredictable. The lone rancher and the Apache woman had grown closer, learning to trust one another in ways they had not imagined possible. But as often happens in life, peace is fragile, and danger can appear when least expected. One early morning, the rancher noticed movement along the far edge of the property. At first he thought it might be an animal, a coyote, or perhaps a stray horse, but as he squinted against the rising sun, he realized the shapes were human. Two men, mounted on horses, were approaching cautiously, scanning the land as they moved. The rancher's heart tightened. Outsiders rarely came here, and when they did, it was often trouble. He motioned silently to the woman who had been tending to the small garden behind the house. "Stay inside," he said quietly, his voice calm but firm. "Don't come out until I tell you it's safe." The rancher mounted his horse and rode toward the approaching men, his hands steady on the reins but his mind alert for any sign of threat. As he drew closer, he could hear their voices carrying across the plains. They spoke harshly, in tones that suggested suspicion and hostility. "What's she doing here?" one of the men demanded. "She doesn't belong to this land." "Turn around and leave," he ordered, "or you'll find yourself in a situation you don't want to be in." The rancher exhaled, his body relaxing only slightly. He knew that this encounter was only a warning. The world outside the ranch would continue to test them, and vigilance was their only protection. He returned to the house, finding the Apache woman waiting, her expression calm but alert. "They left," he said, "for now, but we need to be careful. Others may come." The woman broke the silence first. "I've never had anyone stand up for me like that before," she admitted softly. "Most people would have ignored me or worse." She had survived many dangers, but the act of someone truly standing by her, without hesitation, was unfamiliar. The bond between them had deepened, but so had the awareness that the world outside could intrude at any moment. Days passed, and the tension of the morning encounter remained a silent presence. They continued their routines, working together on the ranch, but there was a subtle shift in their interactions. The woman was more cautious, more aware of the possibility of danger, yet she also began to rely on the rancher in ways she had not before. He, in turn, became more attentive, always watching for signs of trouble and ready to act. Then one afternoon, an unexpected storm rolled in, dark clouds gathering rapidly on the horizon. The wind picked up suddenly, whipping through the tall grass and bending the trees near the river. The rancher noticed the change immediately, knowing the river could rise quickly in a storm. "We need to secure the animals," he said, urgency in his voice. "The river will rise fast, and the cattle could be in danger." In the midst of the storm, the woman lost her footing near the riverbank. She slipped, the mud giving way beneath her, and she fell dangerously close to the water's edge. The rancher's reflexes were immediate. He grabbed her arm, steadying her just before she could be swept away. His grip was strong and reassuring, a lifeline in the chaos. "You have to be careful," he shouted over the wind. "This isn't just the land, it's the storm." "You saved me again," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of relief and emotion. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied, his voice steady despite the storm. "You're not alone, not now, not ever." Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she asked the question that had been lingering in her mind for days. "Will you stay if I take off my clothes?" She was asking if he would remain loyal and protective even when she was fully vulnerable, stripped of defenses, exposed not just physically but emotionally. It was a question of trust, of commitment, and of courage. He looked at her steadily, meeting her gaze without hesitation. "Yes," he said simply. "I'll stay. I'm not leaving. No matter what." The storm began to ease, leaving the plains wet and glistening under the soft light of the late afternoon sun. They returned to the ranch, their steps careful but unhurried, the danger behind them yet the awareness of future challenges ever present. They worked together to secure the animals and repair any damage the storm had caused, their movements silent testimony to the trust that now existed between them. As night fell, they sat by the fire once more, drying off and sharing a quiet meal. The woman looked into the flames, her mind replaying the events of the day. She had faced the storm, the river, and the uncertainty of the outside world, yet she had not faced them alone. For the first time, she truly felt the meaning of partnership, not just survival but mutual respect and care. The rancher watched her silently, understanding the significance of her thoughts. He had spent much of his life alone, guarding against the pain of loss and disappointment. Yet now, in the quiet glow of the firelight, He realized that opening oneself to trust and connection was not weakness, it was courage. Over the next several days, life on the ranch continued, but there was a subtle shift. The woman moved with more confidence, taking initiative in tasks and offering insights that reflected her growing familiarity with the land. The rancher, in turn, found himself more willing to share his thoughts and experiences, revealing parts of his life he had long kept hidden. Their bond deepened, built not just on necessity, but on mutual understanding and shared respect. Even with the dangers that remained in the outside world, there was a sense of hope. They had faced storms, human threats, and the unpredictable forces of nature together, and they had emerged stronger for it. Trust, once fragile and uncertain, had become a foundation on which they could rely. And though the river still flowed unpredictably, and the plains remained wild and untamed, the rancher and the Apache woman had discovered something more enduring than fear or isolation. They had discovered the power of loyalty, the strength of courage, and the profound significance of standing by someone when it mattered most. The days that followed the storm were calm, but life on the ranch was far from easy. The land remained unpredictable, and the outside world still posed threats that could reach them at any time. Yet for the first time in a long while, both the rancher and the Apache woman felt a quiet sense of stability. Their bond, forged through danger, trust, and shared effort, had grown strong enough to weather the challenges that remained. Morning arrived with the soft light of dawn spilling across the plains. The river glimmered under the sun, calm but ever watchful. The rancher went about his daily routine, feeding the animals, checking the fences, and ensuring that the land was secure. The Apache woman worked alongside him, moving with confidence and purpose. She had learned the rhythm of the ranch, the patterns of the river, and the signs that indicated changes in the weather. Each day she grew more capable, more certain of her abilities, yet she never lost the respect for the land and its dangers that had kept her alive. The rancher noticed this growth, and it filled him with a quiet pride. She had arrived at the ranch as a survivor, wary and cautious, but now she moved with a sense of assurance that came from experience and trust. It was a reminder that survival was not just about strength, but about learning, adapting, and forming connections that could help carry one through difficult times. One afternoon, as they worked near the edge of the river, the woman paused to look at the flowing water. Her expression was thoughtful, almost reflective. "The river, it's dangerous," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of awe. "But it also gives life. Without it, none of this would exist. You survive by paying attention, by learning, and by trusting the right people." The days passed, each marked by routine and the quiet beauty of the plains. They worked together seamlessly, their movements coordinated without the need for constant words. The rancher learned to anticipate her actions, and she learned to rely on his guidance when necessary. There was a sense of mutual understanding that deepened with each passing day, a recognition that they were stronger together than apart. Despite this growing harmony, the world outside the ranch remained unpredictable. One morning, the rancher noticed smoke rising in the distance, far beyond the river. It was a sign that the land beyond their sanctuary was in turmoil, perhaps a fire or a distant settlement facing its own challenges. He knew that danger could spread quickly in such situations, and he remained vigilant, ready to protect both the ranch and the woman who had become an important part of his life. The woman noticed his concern and placed a hand on his arm. "We will face it together," she said quietly. "We have faced storms, rivers, and threats before. We can handle this too." It was a choice born of respect, understanding, and the recognition that human connection could be a source of strength. Over time, they encountered small challenges, animals that needed care, fences that required repair, and occasional visitors who tested their boundaries. Each challenge reinforced the lessons they had learned: vigilance, patience, and the importance of trust. They discovered that cooperation was not just a necessity but a path to growth, enabling them to accomplish more than either could alone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, they sat outside, watching the plains stretch endlessly before them. The river shimmered in the fading light, a reminder of both danger and life. The woman spoke first, her voice quiet but steady. "I have never felt this safe before," she admitted. "Not just from the land, but from people. You showed me that trust is possible, even when it seems dangerous. We have to protect it, just as we protect the land and the animals here." "It mattered to me too," he said, "because you mattered, not just as someone I helped, but as someone who chose to trust. That is rare and valuable." The events of the past weeks, the river, the storm, the threats from outsiders, had left their mark, but they had also strengthened the connection between them. They had learned that survival was not just about physical endurance, but about emotional resilience, understanding, and the courage to trust. In the following weeks, they began to plan for the future. The rancher knew that life on the plains would never be entirely safe, but he also understood that with careful preparation and mutual support, they could face whatever challenges came their way. They repaired fences, reinforced the riverbank, and ensured that the animals were well cared for. Each task was a reminder that cooperation and trust were essential for survival, and each success reinforced their bond. The woman also began to think about her community, considering ways to maintain her connection to her people while living safely on the ranch. She shared her knowledge of the land, her skills, and her insights with the rancher, creating a partnership that was both practical and meaningful. Together, they worked to balance independence with cooperation, freedom with responsibility, and safety with growth. One afternoon, as they worked near the edge of the property, the woman paused to look at the horizon. "I have learned so much," she said softly, "not just about the land, but about people. I thought I could only trust myself, but now I see that trust can be shared, and it makes us stronger. It's the willingness to stand together, even when the world seems uncertain." They had faced rivers, storms, and human hostility, and each experience had deepened their connection and understanding. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sharing stories of their past, their hopes, and their dreams. The rancher spoke of his solitary life, the mistakes he had made, and the lessons he had learned. The woman shared stories of her people, the traditions she valued, and the skills that had kept her alive. These conversations created a bridge between their worlds, a connection that went beyond necessity and survival to something deeply human and meaningful. As months passed, the seasons changed, bringing both challenges and beauty to the land. Spring flowers bloomed along the riverbank, and the cattle grazed peacefully on the plains. The rancher and the Apache woman had learned to anticipate the rhythms of the land, to respect its power, and to celebrate its gifts. Life on the ranch became not just survival, but a life filled with purpose, connection, and hope. One evening, as they watched the sun set in a blaze of color, the woman spoke softly. "I was afraid at first," she admitted. "Afraid of the river, afraid of the land, afraid of trusting anyone. But now I feel safe. Not just from danger, but in a deeper way, because you stayed. You stayed when it mattered. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. Because trust, loyalty, and courage matter more than anything else." And so, life continued on the ranch, shaped by the lessons of the river, the storm, and the challenges they had faced together. The rancher and the Apache woman had discovered that survival was not just about strength or skill. It was about courage, trust, and the willingness to stand by someone when it mattered most. In the quiet moments, as the wind whispered through the grass and the river flowed endlessly, they understood that the greatest lesson of all was simple. Life was unpredictable, often dangerous, but filled with the possibility of connection, loyalty, and shared courage. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear, and had emerged stronger together. The plains stretched endlessly before them, a reminder of the beauty and unpredictability of life. The river flowed steadily, a source of both challenge and life. And through it all, the rancher and the Apache woman remained side by side, their bond unbroken, their trust unwavering, and their courage a quiet but powerful force in the vast, untamed land.